For the past 6 months, I've been taking this Fatima statue around different people's homes in New York, trying to spread her message, and I've been doing it on and off for the past 11 years. So I thought that maybe you'd like to finally hear a little bit of my presentation on this channel. In this particular home where the video was filmed, there were 9 devout Catholic ladies listening to the talk, but sometimes it can be as many as 100 people speaking a variety of different languages. Here's a clip from a Lebanese visit where they prayed the rosary in Arabic.
سيدنا يسوع المسيح يا عيسى مريم يا وليدة الله صلي لأجلنا نحن الخطأ.
I believe that culture and education is what's managed to stick around in your memory after all the books you've read and different knowledgeable people that you've talked to, which is exactly what my presentation is at each Fatima visit. After reading and listening to so many lectures about Fatima and the errors of communism for the past 12 years, I have quite a bit to say, but every time I give a talk, I try to speak extemporaneously and at the spur of the moment, because I can't stand saying the same thing every time. And sometimes I have to speak at 3 different Fatima visits in the same day. So depending on the audience, I'll modify my talk, relying on my memory alone. In other words, my internal hard drive is fallible, and I welcome any sort of correction you may have to my talk. But everything I said is based on years of talking to knowledgeable people and my own humble research. But as St. Paul says, probate spiritus et quod bonum est tenete. Test all things, hold fast that which is good. I hope you enjoy it, and keep in mind that I cut out some questions from the audience, which were great at the time, because I like it to be a conversation, but it doesn't really help the overall flow of the video, so I've streamlined it for your convenience. So as I was saying, I'm a part of American Eats Fatima. I've been a part of it for 11 years. We're full-time volunteers, and there's nothing else in the world I'd rather do. And if you're not familiar with the message of Fatima, she appeared in 1917 to 3 little shepherd children, Lucia, Francisco, and Jacinta, aged 10, 9, and 7. And she came to tell us that if mankind did not convert, there would be many chastisements that would occur in the world. She also came to reinforce our belief in hell, because she showed hell to the 3 little shepherd children. And she said the greatest reason why people go to hell is because of sins against the 6th and 9th commandments. So it's important we remember that. Also, she came to warn us about the errors of Russia. And finally, which is the real reason why I like taking around the Fatima statue, is she has a message of hope for us, because she said, in the end, my Immaculate Heart will triumph. And she's speaking of something that's reflected in a lot of other prophecies from different saints, talking about an era of peace in which Our Lady's Immaculate Heart will be honored like she never was before, a resurgence of the church. So it's a very hopeful message. But let's get into some of the symbolism of the statue. So you see that she's crowned. Now, she didn't originally appear with a crown to the 3 little shepherd children, but that's what the church does every time they approve an apparition, because it's very important that the church approves the apparition. And this was the quickest apparition to be approved, just 2 years after something like the miracle of the sun, witnessed by 70,000 people. It makes it pretty easy, right? And it's important that the church does that because, are you familiar with Our Lady of Lourdes?
Oh, yes.
And she appeared to St. Bernadette. So a friend told me that at the same time in France, there were 200 other false apparitions. And what was that? That was the devil trying to distract from the real message of Our Lady of Lourdes, which was that she was the Immaculate Conception. So that's why the church approves apparitions. It's very important. Secondly, you see the rosary. And Our Lady asked us to pray the rosary every day at Fatima, so at least 5 decades a day. And I just found an amazing quote from St. Louis de Montfort. He says, anyone who prays his rosary every day will never be led astray. This is a statement that I would sign with my own blood. So that's a very powerful testimony for the rosary. Also, St. Padre Pio said, the rosary is the greatest weapon of our century. And Blessed Pius IX said, give me an army praying the rosary, and I will overcome the world. So these are very powerful testimonies. We should be praying the rosary every day. And basically every time Our Lady appears, she's begging mankind to pray the rosary, and we just can't seem to get the message. But so that's the rosary. I think that the ball symbolizes the world. Yeah, that's what I think, because the original version of the miraculous medal was actually Our Lady holding the world, and so she's showing us that she's looking out for us. She has the world in the palm of her hand, and I don't know if you can see it, but there's a star right here. Now, that could stand for a couple of her titles, like Star of the Sea, Morning Star. So if we're ever going through hard times, we can remember that she's our heavenly star, guiding us to our heavenly port. And also you see that she is barefoot, and she's reminding us of what she's going to step on, which is the serpent, right? The serpent, because in the book of Genesis, God told the serpent, I will put enmities between thy seed and her seed, because she's the new Eve, and she will crush thy head, and thou shalt lie in wait for her heel. And that's the reason that the devil is very scared of Our Lady. He's a very prideful demon, and she is called Our Lady, Terror of Demons. So we can always remember that if we feel tempted or we're going through a rough time. Now, at any point, you can ask me questions, because I think of this more like a conversation, right? And I only learn things through asking questions personally. But first, I'd like to ask myself a question. Why Fatima in particular? So there's lots of other apparitions of Our Lady of La Salette, Our Lady of Lourdes. But yeah, so why Fatima in particular? And it's because Lucia, one of the seers, she wanted there to be traveling virgin statues. And so you remember that Francisco and Jacinta, they died shortly after the apparitions, because they were supposed to be victim souls. They died due to Spanish influenza. But Our Lady told Lucia that she had the job of spreading the message. And at that point, she was 12 years old. So that's a pretty daunting task for a 12-year-old. But she still managed to convince the townspeople in Fatima to build a beautiful shrine in Our Lady's honor. But unfortunately, it was very hastily built, and it burned down 1 month later. And then they had a second shrine built, this time far larger and more beautiful, but it was blown up by Portuguese communists. Because remember, she spoke against the errors of Russia, which we know is communism, or the stepping stone to communism, which is socialism. So we have to be careful of that too. So then they had a third shrine built, and that's the one that stood the test of time, and it still stands there today. It's one of the largest pilgrimage sites of Our Lady in the world. She also asked a lot of Catholic universities to write a book about Fatima. She was asking different Catholic universities to document it, and the first one to comply was Fordham University, and it's a book called Our Lady of Fatima by William Thomas Walsh. And everything in my talk is based on that book. It's a definitive study of Fatima. Now, if you met a 10-year-old girl that said that she saw Our Lady, what would you ask her? What's the first thing that comes into your mind? Yeah, what'd she look like? Everybody was asking Lucia that. She was a little bit annoyed because she was like, it's more important what Our Lady said. But, since everybody wants to know what Our Lady looked like, she was going to find a Spanish artist, and she designed a beautiful statue, and it went all around the world, spreading the Fatima message until it went to Russia, where unfortunately they left it in a church overnight and it was stolen. Because remember, she spoke against the errors of Russia. But that made Lucia think. She was 29 years old at that point. She was in the convent. And she said, well, if the devil really hates these traveling statues so much, I'm going to have a second one built. But this time, it's going to be exactly how I remember her. And so she found the original Spanish artist, and she looked at the designs, and she tore them up and threw them in the trash. She said, this time, it's going to be perfect. And she spent an hour just on the folds of Our Lady's mantle. Remember, this is a long time after the apparitions, and she still remembered the tiniest details. She spent another hour just on how Our Lady folded her hands. And when that statue was completed, it's known as the International Pilgrim Virgin statue, and you can still see it to this day. And my statue is an exact replica of that one, because why not? I mean, it's the one that closely resembles Lucia's memory of Our Lady. And I call that statue the miraculous statue because it cried real tears in New Orleans in 1972. And there were pictures of it too. You're going to see pictures of it. in the video that I'm going to show you. But the local bishop there in New Orleans wasn't quite sure if it was real or a hoax, so he allowed the local newspaper, the Clarion Herald, to run a series of tests on the statue. So they x-rayed it to see if there was anything inside that would make her cry, and there was nothing. They even poured water down the hole in the top of her head for her crown to see if anything would come out from her eyes. There was nothing. And they had the tears analyzed in a lab, and the test results came back teardrops from a human. So you can be absolutely sure that that statue cried real tears. And she also cried at the next 14 stops in that tour. And I've heard that she's cried 100 times ever since then. So my statue is an exact replica of that one. And at that time, it was 1917. So what was going on in 1917? World War I. It was one of the worst wars. They said this is the war to end all wars. There's never going to be another one as bad as this one. But Our Lady came to tell us that a second and even worse war would come, and a strange unknown light would appear in the sky. And it just so happens that in January of 1938, there was this massive blood red aurora borealis that was never seen before, and it was seen all over Europe and as far southwest as Bermuda.
Excuse me, my parents testified to that.
Really?
My parents, my father was in the war, and he was captured also by the Germans, I think.
Uh-huh.
Yes, and both my mom and dad saw that circle around the earth.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I met someone on a Fatima visit that said, oh yeah, my grandfather saw that. And so that means it was seen over here in Buffalo, which is pretty impressive. But right after that, Hitler invaded Poland, and the rest is history. Now, what was the other thing going on in 1917? The communist Bolshevik revolution in Russia. And so when Our Lady said Russia will spread her errors, the three little shepherd children had no idea what Russia even was. They thought it was a woman's name. And they were like, oh, I guess a woman could go around spreading her errors, but the adults knew exactly what they were talking about. But if all that was going on in Russia, why didn't Our Lady just appear there? Why Portugal in particular? And it's because there was a pincer movement with the communists, and they were planning on infiltrating the other side of Europe through Portugal. And there was a communist government, the communist PRP. It was a political party in Portugal. And they had outlawed things like public prayer, or if you were a priest or religious, you couldn't wear your habit or collar outside your church or place of residence. You couldn't wear it in the street. They also outlawed Christmas decorations, both inside and outside the home. And if you were a kid at the time, you would say, well, all I want at Christmas are my gifts. But they outlawed giving gifts as well. And the Catholic News Service reports that in the 4 years leading up to 1917, there were 2,000 priests that went missing in Portugal with no murder investigation to follow. And remember that Portugal is about the size of the state of Maine, so you would definitely notice if your parish priest or your friend's parish priest went missing. And in Lisbon, there were 14 churches that burned down. And after the miracle of the sun, there were many more churches that were burned. It reminds me of something here in America, but anyway. So the most common name in Portugal for boys was Lenin. And since there aren't that many female communist leaders, they would just name girls Lenin spelt backwards, which is like Nanelle or something. It's really bizarre. Or other names like electricity, progress, stuff like that. But what put an end to the communist movement in Portugal? Well, effectively, it was the miracle of the sun. That's why our Lord worked miracles, because they're undeniable. Even the communists had to agree, even the papers had to agree that something was going on in that field, witnessed by 70,000 people, and even more than that at a distance of up to 25 miles, where the sun danced around in the sky for 10 minutes, and people were so terrified that they were kneeling in the mud and rain, confessing their sins, because they thought it was the end of the world. They thought it was the end. And when they got up, and the sun returned to its rightful spot in the sky, they saw that their clothes were not only dry, but dry cleaned. And no one could deny that there was a massive miracle. And like I said, there were more churches to burn down kind of as a retaliation in Portugal. And then the Communist Party, they split into 8 different political parties because there was a bunch of infighting and basically petered out. So Our Lady effectively smashed communism in Portugal. That's why she appeared there. And she said, Portugal will never lose the dogma of the faith. I don't know exactly how that applies to now. Could it be that the church there will never, or that the people there will never lose the dogma of the faith? I don't know. But that's what Our Lady said. Now, if you read the Communist Manifesto, it's a very boring read, but they say that there has to be 3 things that have to be got rid of in a country before communism can be implemented. And the first is tradition. They say that there has to be a radical rupture with tradition. And what's the greatest tradition that we can hand down to our kids? So a lot of people say that. It's very funny. Christmas, yeah, it's our faith. But Christmas is such an integral part of like the traditions and everything. You can see why they banned it. But I would say the greatest tradition we hand down is our faith, and Christmas is an aspect of that, of course. The young man last night, I was giving a visit to a family, and he said, "Yeah, Christmas," and it's true. That's why they banned it. It's such a special time, So that's why in Portugal they were getting rid of like roadside crucifixes, and they prohibited public demonstrations of prayer, and that's why our group is so particular about rosary rallies. And last year we sponsored 500,000 rosary rallies at different times and locations all around the country, and even some in Cuba. Like we have secret agents there in Cuba that set up a banner, and they do public rosary rallies. Why? Because one of my favorite saints, St. Louis de Montfort, says that public prayer is far more powerful than private prayer to appease the anger of God. So that's why we put such an emphasis on doing rosary rallies. So that's the first thing, tradition. The second thing is family, or more explicitly, marriage. The Communist Manifesto says that marriage is just an invention that husbands came up with to have domination over their wives. And you wouldn't be surprised that Russia was they implemented a sort of zero-fault divorce law. It was the USSR at that time, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. So it's funny, socialism leads to communism. And incidentally, the Germans, like the Nazis, they also had socialism as a part of their name. So we have to be very wary of socialism. But anyway, yeah, they implemented a zero-fault divorce law. And if you wanted to get divorced, all you'd have to do, you'd apply for like this kind of postcard, and you would check that box. Either party could check that box, and effectively, you were divorced. Now, I'm not married, but there's got to be one day you just really want to check that box, And it just made a mockery of marriage, and we know that our Lord elevated marriage to a sacrament. It's not a social construct. It's completely real. And as regards to the family, Russia legalized abortion nationwide. It was the first country to do so. And they also want to re-educate your kids. So when they take over in a country, they'll say that there's no history before the communist revolution, so they want to cut out history. And it kind of reminds me of a case in Mississauga, Ontario, where a public school library, they wanted to ban all books since before 2008. So they're trying to get rid of history. And it kind of reminds me of the transgender education of our youth. Telling a child that they can change their gender is child abuse, and also things like Drag Queen Story Hour, it could be pre-K, which our group was the first to start protesting, If you've seen this movie called The Killing Fields, it's about the communist takeover in Cambodia. There's a scene where the communists are educating the children separate from their parents, and they have a chalkboard with a stick figure family, and they're all holding hands. And they ask them, what's wrong with this picture? And one of the students comes up and they erase the parents holding hands with their kids. So communists want to re-educate your kids. So that's family. And the third thing, everybody knows this about communism, the abolition of private property. Why? Because they believe in radical equality. And since we're all equal, no man has the right to have more than the next man. But we know from the book of Ecclesiastes that every man has the right to the fruits of his labor. You cannot mandate charity. If a person wants to give away of their own free will, you cultivate a more Catholic society, and there will be more charity. But you can't take it from them. That's theft. It's also against natural law. As regards to radical equality, the communists in Vietnam and Cambodia, they took it to the next level because they said anybody that's a professor or a school teacher, you and your family will be tortured and killed because you know more than the other person. There's a certain amount of equality that we all have, but we're unequal in our accidents. So I'm terrible at math, and I think we do need great mathematicians, but making everybody dumb isn't the answer. You couldn't have anything, you know? So in Cambodia and Vietnam, that's what they were doing to public school teachers. And in Cambodia, if you even looked like an intellectual, if you wore glasses, you would be killed. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.5 people that would not make it in Cambodia. Those are just readers. Yeah, that's what you need to tell the Cambodians. And also in Cambodia, I think there's a scene in the killing fields where they're looking at the people's hands and they're saying, your hands are not calloused enough. You didn't work as much as this other person, so we need to kill you. And they would strangle them right there. So that sort of thing happened in countries where they were able to fully implement it. So those are the three things: tradition, family, and property. And it just so happens that that's the real name of my group. So America Needs Fatima is part of a much larger group called Tradition, Family, and Property. And if you see this pin, it means that I'm a full-time volunteer. The pin is a line of the tribe of Judah, which is our Lord, and he's facing the left. He's combating the leftist ideas. And it's our job to spread the message of Fatima and fight the errors of Russia, of communism, both inside the home in these little Fatima visits or in the public square. So I do 2 visits a day, and this is a big part of my job. But the other half of my job is doing pro-life campaigns outside in the public square, holding signs against transgenderism, the evils of transgenderism, holding signs that say God's marriage equals one man and one woman. Protesting Drag Queen Story Hour. Our group was the first group to start protesting that. And we even do it at Catholic universities, and sometimes you get kicked off of Catholic universities, in between quotes, like Georgetown, Georgetown. Yeah, it's Catholic in name.
Seeing your videos, it's amazing how you young men mostly, keep your composure.
Well, we do that through, in our downtime. We're in more of a monastic setting. Even though we're lay Catholics, we still believe in studying these issues in silence and meditating, praying the rosary every day, leading a life of prayer. So then when you're out in the public square, that's just a natural reflection of the interior life that you formed when off the job, let's say. So to the liberals, it's a surprise, like you're smiling and they're just flipping out at you. So for the last 9 years, I filmed different university campaigns that we did, or just campaigns in the street. And I would do so for security purposes, because in those 9 years, I've seen a rock thrown at us, I've seen a brick thrown at us, I've been shoved around, I've been spat on, we've been sprayed with weed killer, we've been pepper sprayed, we've been maced, all in the name of fighting for life, fighting against the evils of transgenderism, or fighting against socialism, just stating the truth as it is in a non-inflammatory manner, which I think that is a further testament to what St. Louis de Montfort said. Public prayer is far more powerful than private prayer. And the leftists know that. That's why they fight against us. I think we can get to the video. And before I started, I just wanted to emphasize 3 different prophecies of Our Lady. And the first is that doctors will forget how to cure or to heal. Now, that could be they reject the Hippocratic Oath and they actively do harm. Could be things like euthanasia, as we're seeing in Canada. Could be abortion. 45 million abortions worldwide. Could be that. Or it could be that all of their databases of diagnoses will be wiped out, so they don't know how to cure anything. I don't know. And then the second one is several nations will be annihilated, but God will bring about peace by establishing devotion to my Immaculate Heart. So that's why we really need to promote devotion to Our Lady. And the third and final one is the most consoling one, because she said, in the end, my Immaculate Heart will triumph. And so we're hoping for a resurgence of the church in that era of peace. And Lucia, in her writing, said that the final battle will be over two things: what is marriage and what is family? Which didn't make a lot of sense at the time that she wrote it, but it definitely makes sense now. So before I show the video, are there any questions?
Is this what you do for a living? I mean,
Yes, ma'am.
you get paid?
No, I don't. We don't have a salary. We don't have a salary, and we rely on the generosity of others. So, yeah.
Because I was going to say, you're all over the country. How do you get there?
Yeah, we're in 21 different countries around the world, or I think it's 27 now.
Travel, so it's just donations?
Yeah, that's it.
Oh,
Yeah,
my gosh.
that's what a 501c3 is. You know.
It's all part of American.
Yeah. Yeah.
Linda has done many outside rallies, like right in the.
Oh, I'm so happy.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that's amazing.
I've taken some,
You've taken some heat? That's another reason why we're all men, because it can get very intense sometimes. And there's some situations that I don't want a lady to be in. I would rather, or children, I would rather them not be there in a lot of different situations. So you need someone that's like their full-time job doing that to protest certain things. You know, we can be there at a minute's notice. And the whole idea, our founder, Professor Plinio Correia de Oliveira, he started it in Brazil in 1960. And he basically stopped communism in Brazil because they were trying to implement agrarian reform, where they would take a percentage of your property. And he did street campaigns and stopped that. There were a lot of things that he did to stop the flow of communism. So are there any other questions?
So you need security then. I mean,
So after that, I show them a video we made, which tells the story of the Fatima apparitions, and then we pray the rosary. But I'm not sure if I can show the video on this channel because we'd like to keep it exclusive for the in-home Fatima visits. And if you'd like to schedule one in your own home, you can call the number in the description below. However, I did make my own video in which I go over the most important prophecies of Our Lady of Fatima, and you can see it now by clicking on the link above me here. God bless you, and Our Lady keep you. Our Lady of Fatima, pray for us.